My name is Renee Ashford. I'm 35, and I'm a forensic accountant, which means I've spent my whole career finding the one number in a stack of 1,000 that doesn't belong. So when my mother called to tell me she'd added my sister to my brokerage account, I didn't yell. I did what I always do. I found the error. It was a Wednesday afternoon in April. I was at my desk in downtown Cincinnati, 3 hours into tracing a vendor kickback scheme for a client, when my mother's name lit up my phone, her voice arriving like confetti. "We took care of the paperwork, sweetheart. Whitney's finally going to get her studio off the ground, and you won't even feel it." I set down my pen. "Funny," I said. "I moved everything out 3 weeks ago. There's $12.75 left. Here's what none of them knew yet. The money had never been the real crime. The real crime was a single sheet of paper with a doctor's signature on it, from a doctor who never wrote a word of it. What my family did with that piece of paper is the reason my mother eventually sat across a table from a fraud investigator, and the reason I had to decide, once and for all, what I actually owed the people who raised me. If you're the one in your family who always gets the phone call when something needs fixing, the one who's praised for being so responsible and then handed the bill for it, stay with me. This is a story about the moment I stopped answering that phone the old way. To understand that April phone call, you have to go back to February, to a version of me who still thought her family's love came with no strings, just occasional invoices. I live alone in a converted loft in Cincinnati's over-the-Rhine neighborhood, 20 minutes from my parents' place in the suburb of Montgomery. I have a rescue greyhound named Denominator. Yes, I named my dog after a math term, and no, I don't regret it, and a bookshelf organized by Dewey Decimal Logic I made up myself. I reconcile ledgers and trace fraud for a living. I notice the penny that's out of place. It's not a glamorous job, but it bought me a quiet, solvent life, and I earned every bit of it: scholarships, a decade of overnight audits, junior analyst to senior forensic examiner in 9 years. In my family, though, my job title was never forensic accountant. It was the reliable one. And reliability, in my house, was never a compliment. It was a chore chart nobody let me put down. I did my parents' taxes every February at their kitchen table, free of charge. When my sister needed a cosigner for her car 2 years ago, I was the name on the loan. When her streaming subscriptions and gym membership started auto-drafting from a card I temporarily lent her, temporary stretched to 16 months. I paid. I smoothed things over. I told myself that was what love looked like in my family. Here's the thing nobody tells you about being the reliable one: you don't get thanked, because your reliability gets treated like the weather. Nobody thanks the sky for staying blue. My mother called me her anchor. It took me 35 years to notice that an anchor is a thing other people stand on while you're the one holding everything down, alone, underwater. Hat February, I was 35, single, steady, the daughter with the spreadsheet for a heart. I thought my place in the family was solid ground. I was about to learn there were 2 kinds of daughters in my family, and only one of them got protected when things went wrong. The account started with my grandmother. Nana Pearl was my mother's mother, a woman who used cloth napkins until they disintegrated, kept a coffee can of coins for the church collection, and was, without question, the only person in my family who ever really saw me for who I was instead of what I could do for everyone else. In 1999, when I was 8, my grandfather's small life insurance policy paid out, and Nana took $5,000 of it and opened a custodial investment account in my name, the kind a parent manages until the child is old enough to take it over herself. My mother, Carol, was named custodian, since Nana didn't trust bank paperwork she couldn't read twice at the kitchen table. I still remember Nana's hand on my shoulder, light as a bird landing. "This one's for the girl who counts things twice," she told me. "Someday everybody's going to lean on you. Make sure you keep a little something for yourself." When I turned 21, the account transferred to me alone, the way the law requires. By then it had grown to roughly $10,000. I treated it like a garden that needed tending every single month. $400 a month when I was starting out. $700 once I made senior analyst. 14 years of automatic transfers into boring, patient index funds, through every recession, every market panic, every year I told myself just keep going. By that February, it sat at $138,000. My retirement. My proof that a girl from a rented duplex could build something that was entirely, unshakably hers. In my mother's mouth, though, it never had my name on it. She called it the family cushion. Light, like a joke, every single time she said it. Once, years earlier, I'd corrected her, "It's my retirement account, Mom," and she'd laughed the way you laugh at a toddler who says something both adorable and completely wrong. "Family doesn't keep score, honey," she said. I used to think that was a sweet little family motto. I hadn't done the math on it yet. My sister Whitney is 30, 5 years younger than me, and for the better part of a decade she has been perpetually about to find her thing. First it was a candle-making pop-up. My parents covered 8 months of lease before it folded. Then a life coaching certification, $3,800, paid out of my mother's savings, which produced exactly one paying client, our own aunt. Then came a jewelry line that never shipped past 100 units. Every chapter began with a family dinner where Whitney glowed with a new vision board, and ended, quietly, with somebody else's money disappearing into it. She lives in my parents' finished basement in Montgomery, in a bedroom my father drywalled for her when she was 28 days from being evicted from her last apartment. I want to be fair, because fairness is my whole profession. Whitney isn't cruel. She's what happens when nobody ever lets a person hit the floor and feel how hard it is. She never learned where the floor even was. My mother built her a world with no consequences and no invoices, and Whitney simply decorated the world she was handed. That February, the new dream was a ceramic studio, hand-thrown pottery classes, a storefront in a trendy strip near Hyde Park, a logo already designed, soft terracotta letters spelling clay and bloom. Nobody mentioned a dollar figure out loud, which in my family is exactly how you know money is the whole point of the conversation. Then, on a Tuesday, my mother texted, "Sunday dinner, 6 p.m. Family business to discuss." I sat in my parked car outside my office and read it 3 times. My stomach did the thing it does mid-audit, right before the numbers go sideways. In my family, family business had only ever meant one thing, my wallet. Sunday, 6 o'clock, the good china came out, which told me before anyone said a word that the ask would be enormous. My mother deploys her wedding china the way other people deploy lawyers. Pot roast. Mashed potatoes. My father, Mitch to everyone, including his own kids, already studying his plate like it owed him an explanation. Whitney practically humming with anticipation. My mother waited until dessert, then folded her hands on the tablecloth. "We've been talking," she said, "and the we conspicuously did not include me. Whitney's studio needs $70,000 to open properly. And honey, your investment account is just sitting there." She said just sitting there the way you'd say a ladder is just sitting in the garage, unused, practically begging to be borrowed. She even knew the balance, close enough. I'd listed it myself on a family asset worksheet back in 2020, during a big paperwork day my parents had insisted on after Nana's first small stroke. One tidy line I'd regretted every day since, because my mother had clearly been quietly compounding that number in her head for 2 years. I set down my fork. I kept my voice level, because level is the only speed I own. "That account is my retirement, Mom. It started with Nana's money." The answer is no. I'm happy to help Whitney put together a real business plan and look at small business loans. Silence you could balance a teaspoon on. Whitney's chin trembled on cue. My dad reached for potatoes he clearly didn't want. My mother looked at me with a smile I'd been on the receiving end of since I was 7, soft, disappointed, endlessly patient. "Renee. Family doesn't keep score." There it was again, that pretty little sentence. For the first time in my life, I heard the fine print buried inside it. I said no 2 more times before I left. I still hugged everyone goodbye. Old habits don't check the news before they act. Driving home, I told myself it was settled, that no was a complete sentence, that grown women don't need a permission slip for their own retirement account. But at the door, my mother had squeezed my hand and said, "We'll figure something out, honey." She wasn't asking anymore. I just didn't understand yet what she thought there was left to figure out. The weeks after that dinner went quiet, which, in hindsight, should have been my first red flag. My family does not do quiet after a no. Quiet, for them, is never surrender. It's reloading. Instead, my mother got suddenly, intensely curious about my health. A call to ask if I was sleeping well. Another the next week to ask if work was stressing me out, whether I was still seeing my longtime doctor, Dr. Ferris, over on Erie Avenue, whether I was taking anything for it. My mother had asked about my blood pressure maybe twice in 3 decades combined. This new bedside manner sat on me like a wet wool coat. Then Whitney texted, asking if I still had the folder from our big paperwork day, copies of everyone's estate documents from after Nana's stroke. "Mom wants to update the file," she wrote. I told her I'd look. Then I sat very still, because here's what I do for a living: I reconcile 2 sets of records that are supposed to match and find the exact place where they diverge. Sudden concern about my sleep, from a woman who once described stress as a rich person's hobby. Pointed questions about my doctor. A request to gather up my legal documents. Individually, small change. Added together, a discrepancy. That night I pulled my personal document box down from my closet, the one with the good hanging folders, and went through it with a highlighter like I was auditing a stranger's shoebox of receipts. Passport. Deed. Insurance policies. And there, in the estate planning folder, a copy of a document I'd signed back in 2020 and mostly forgotten about. The pages suddenly felt warm in my hands. The original of that document wasn't in my box. It was at my parents' house, in the filing cabinet in my mother's hallway. I drove to Montgomery that Saturday and found my father in the garage, half buried under the hood of the 1985 pickup truck he's been restoring since I was in high school. That truck is where my father lives, if we're being completely honest about it. The house belongs to my mother the way a courtroom belongs to a judge. I brought him coffee and stood there while he tinkered with a fuel line. "Dad. What is Mom planning?" He wiped his hands on a red shop rag, slow, buying himself time by the yard. "Planning dinner, probably. Meatloaf night." "Dad." He looked up then, and my father has these tired, pale eyes that always seem to be apologizing for something they refuse to name out loud. "Your mother handles the paperwork, Renee. Always has. You know that." That one sentence was the whole man: an excuse, a filing system, and a confession, folded neatly together. I wouldn't understand the confession part for months. I asked if Whitney's studio was still happening. "Your mother thinks it'll be good for her," he said, and your mother did a great deal of quiet, careful work inside that sentence. We stood there in the smell of motor oil, and I almost told him about the strange phone calls, the questions about my doctor, the way the small hairs on my arms had started standing up for no reason I could name yet. But you can't hand a fragile thing to a man whose hands are permanently occupied by an engine that will never run again. I hugged him and got back in my car. As I backed out of the driveway, my father set down his rag and called out after me, louder than he ever talks. "Whatever happens, Renee, your mother loves you girls the same." I drove home with those words rattling around the back seat like a loose bolt. People don't say whatever happens unless something is already scheduled to happen. The call came on a Tuesday night in March, while I was rinsing a single plate and a single fork, the dishware of a woman living exactly the life she can afford. I missed it. What I got instead was a 4-minute voicemail, pocket-dialed from my mother's own kitchen. I stood at my counter and listened to pans clattering, water running, and then my mother's voice, casual as a grocery list, talking to my sister. "Once we're on the account, the studio deposit goes out first. Then we'll figure out the rest." A cabinet door closing. Whitney's voice, smaller. "What if she finds out?" My mother, with no more weight in her tone than a weather report. "By then it'll be done, Whit. She'll be upset. Then she'll get over it. She always does. I played it twice. The second time, I wasn't listening for the plan anymore. I was listening to that last sentence. She always does. There it was, my entire job description in this family, delivered on a 4-minute accidental voicemail. Get upset. Get over it. Get billed again. I want to be precise about what I felt, because it wasn't rage. Rage runs hot. This was the cold that comes off a ledger finally balancing after years of forced, deliberate errors, the strange relief of a number that finally stops lying to you. I didn't know yet how they thought they could actually get access to an account that had my name on it and mine alone. That was the piece that refused to reconcile. The door I couldn't find. I saved the voicemail, not as a weapon, since I already understood no detective cares about background kitchen noise, but as an anchor, so that whatever anyone told me to my face later, I would never again doubt my own arithmetic. My closest friend from college, Priya Chandrasekhar, is an estate and elder law attorney, and God had the good sense to put her 3 miles from my apartment. Wednesday, over coffee near the courthouse, I slid my phone across the table and let her listen to the voicemail through my earbuds. Priya has a poker face you could land a plane on, but I watched her jaw tighten. Okay, she said. First, breathe. Second, this recording is a warning, not a case. There's no actual crime on it. Wanting access to an account isn't illegal, and the police aren't going to move on your mother's kitchen noise. Then how would they even do it? I asked. It's an individual account. My name only. I've checked the titling twice. Priya stirred her coffee, thinking, then asked the question that quietly rearranged the rest of my spring. Renee, after your grandmother's stroke, when your family did that big paperwork day, what exactly did you sign? The coffee shop got very loud and very far away all at once. In 2020, after Nana's first stroke, the whole family had sat down with an attorney and done what felt at the time like the responsible, adult thing: wills, healthcare directives, and a springing power of attorney, a document that stays dormant unless 2 specific things happen. I become incapacitated, and a licensed physician certifies that in writing. The moment both boxes are checked, my named agent can act on my finances as though she were me. My named agent, chosen back when the word felt like harmless paperwork, back when my mother still felt entirely like my mother, Carol Ashford. Priya looked at me over her cup. Who holds the original? She asked, gently, the way a nurse peels back a bandage. My mom. In her filing cabinet. Neither of us said anything for a moment. If you've ever signed something because you trusted family more than you trusted your own gut, I want you to know you weren't the only one. What my mother eventually did with that one piece of paper still makes my hands go cold when I think about it. Thursday morning, I took 2 hours off and did exactly what Priya told me to do. I signed a formal revocation of the 2020 power of attorney in front of a notary, with Priya's paralegal as witness. We mailed certified copies to the attorney who drafted the original, and to Concord Ridge Financial, the brokerage that had held my account since I was 21. I executed a brand new power of attorney naming Priya, someone whose loyalty I'd never had to earn through a decade of free tax returns. I changed every password. Set up login and transfer alerts on everything. Rerouted my financial mail to a locked box at the post office. Textbook, airtight, except Priya called me back Friday with the part they don't put in the pamphlets. The revocation is legally valid the second you sign it, she said. But Concord Ridge is a machine. Documents go into a queue. A human has to scan it, index it, attach it to your file. That can take days. Sometimes weeks. And if someone walks in first with the old power of attorney and a doctor's letter claiming you're incapacitated, the firm has to sort out the conflict internally. And while they sort it out, they freeze everything. You could be the one having to prove you're competent. I sat with that for a long moment. Nana's seed money. 14 years of $400 months. Frozen in a vault, while my own family quietly argued in writing that I was too broken to speak for myself. I looked around my small, clean apartment, at denominator asleep on the rug, at my alphabetized bookshelf, at a life I'd built from $10,000 and one grandmother's hand on my shoulder. There was exactly one way to make my account not worth stealing. Empty it. People imagine cashing out $138,000 feels like something out of a movie. It feels like homework. I spent an entire weekend at my kitchen table with a spreadsheet, because I don't do anything angry that I can also do accurately. Which lots to sell, in what order, so the tax hit landed as softly as it could. What the capital gains would cost me the following April, a real number, 5 figures of real, and I stared at it for a long time before typing accepted in the margin. Call it the price of a fireproof life. Monday, I opened a brand new account at a different firm entirely, Meridian Trust, across town, titled in my name alone. No shared history, no family folklore attached to it. Maximum security settings. A fresh email address that existed for exactly one purpose. 2-factor authentication on everything. Alerts stacked on alerts. Tuesday night, with denominator snoring beside my chair and my laptop glowing like a small altar, I pulled up the sell orders. All of it. Every patient, boring index fund I'd fed since I was 21 years old. My cursor hovered over the confirm button, and I'm going to be honest about the one moment I hesitated. It wasn't the taxes. It wasn't even fear of my mother's reaction. It was that clicking that button meant admitting, in writing, to myself, that my own family had become whether I needed shelter from, that the people who taught me to ride a bike were now a risk category on my personal balance sheet. Nana Pearl's voice came back to me, her hand light on my shoulder. Make sure you keep a little something for yourself. I thought, I'm trying, Nana. This is me trying. I clicked. The screen blinked once, polite as a bank teller, and the unwinding of my family began with 3 quiet words, order received. The next 6 days were the strangest of my life, because they were completely silent and completely deafening at the same time. Trades take time to settle. The market sells the funds. The cash sits there catching its breath before it can move anywhere. Every morning I woke up, fed the dog, went to the office, smiled through client meetings, and checked my balance the way a farmer checks the sky. The account had opened that week at $138,410. Then the transfers began in batches, wired over to Meridian Trust. 138 became 90. 90 became 40. Concord Ridge's fraud prevention line actually called me during the second batch, a polite man reading carefully off a script, verifying a large outgoing transfer, asking if I had authorized this activity. Yes, I told him. This is Renee. Yes, I authorize it. You have no idea what those words felt like in my mouth, after weeks of quietly learning that somewhere across town, my own mother was assembling paperwork designed to say I wasn't competent to say anything at all. 40 became 12. 12 became 400. And on that final transfer, I did something no spreadsheet on earth suggested. I didn't zero it out. I sat there with the cursor blinking in the amount field, did one small piece of private math, and typed a figure that left exactly $12.75 behind. To the cent. Like a signature only 2 people alive could actually read. Then I closed my laptop, made a cup of tea, and noticed my hands were completely steady, which frightened me a little. Why 1275, and not 0? Hold on to that question. Because some debts never made it onto a bank statement. I was the only one who'd ever kept the real books on it. Priya came over that Friday with takeout and a legal pad, because that's her version of a wellness check. Between bites of pad thai, she asked the obvious question. Why not just confront them? Lay it all out. Tell them what you know. I'd thought about it plenty. Confront them with what, a kitchen voicemail? Mom will cry. Whitney will post something vague about toxic energy. Sunday dinner will taste exactly like it always tastes. I've had that conversation for 30 years. I can write both sides of it from memory at this point. She nodded slowly. So what's the plan? Revenge? I remember exactly what I told her, because saying it out loud was the first time I understood my own internal ledger. I'm not angry. I'm done being the bank. That weekend, done stopped being a mood and turned into a checklist. I called the credit union about the car loan I'd co-signed for Whitney and started the paperwork to get my name off it through a refinance. I canceled the card that had been quietly feeding her gym membership for 16 months. I emailed my parents, kindly and professionally, that a colleague of mine would be handling their taxes going forward at the firm's standard rate. She's excellent, I wrote. You'll be in great hands. Small things. Hinges. Doors I'd been propping open with my own body since I was a teenager, clicking quietly shut, one at a time. The house of my family wouldn't notice the draft until winter arrived. Priya watched me work through the list and asked one more question, softer this time. The 1275. Why that number? I just smiled and topped off her wine glass. That number was a receipt only 2 people in the world could actually read. And one of them had long since forgotten she'd ever written it. I was 13 this summer. I learned the real rules of my house, even though nobody ever posted them on the fridge. I babysat the twins 2 doors down that whole July, juice spills, tantrums, one memorable bloody lip, and by the end of it, I'd earned exactly enough for one thing I wanted badly, an afternoon at the ice rink with my 2 best friends before school started again. $12.75, counted out and folded into an envelope in my sock drawer, recounted so many times the paper had gone soft at the creases. The Friday of the skating trip, the envelope was empty. Whitney was 8. She'd found it, taken all of it, and spent it at the corner drugstore on hair clips and a tiny plastic purse for a doll she already had a shoebox full of. I did what 13-year-olds do. I yelled. I cried. I demanded justice from the highest court in our household. And my mother knelt down, gathered thief and victim into the same hug, and delivered the verdict that would quietly run my life for the next 2 decades. Sisters share, Renee. Family doesn't keep score. Nobody drove me to the rink that afternoon. Nobody paid me back. My friends went without me. Whitney's doll got a new purse. It's such a small story. That's exactly why I'm telling it. Because the big betrayals never arrive first. They're just the small ones, compounding quietly like interest nobody ever audits. So 22 years later, when I emptied that account down to the very last transfer, I left my family exactly what my family had left me. They could have the $12.75. It was the only thing in that account they'd ever actually been owed. And if my mother ever noticed the number and remembered where it came from, well, then she'd know the books had been open the entire time. April was the strangest month, because I was the only person at any table who knew the plan had already, quietly, ended. My mother turned sweet, not her ordinary sweet, but the negotiating kind, the kind that arrives holding a casserole dish. She invited me to lunch twice. She complimented me the way other people leave fingerprints. My hair looked healthy. My apartment sounded charming. Whitney posted a story with soft terracotta graphics, big things coming soon. My cousins liked it. My aunt commented a row of sparkle emojis. I sat in my kitchen watching a countdown only I could see, feeling like the one engineer on the whole project who already knew the bridge was closed. I went to my father's birthday dinner mid-month and played my part exactly as written. I brought the cake. I laughed at his joke about turning 61 in a 40-year-old truck. I did the dishes with my mother while she hummed along to the radio. If you're wondering why I kept showing up at all, here's the honest truth, and it's the truth for every woman like me. I wasn't protecting the plan anymore. I was saying goodbye in installments to something they couldn't see was already over. Over dish soap, my mother asked, light as lint, whether I could send her a photocopy of my driver's license and my insurance card. For the family file, honey. Just in case of emergencies. The family file. I dried my hands slowly. I'll take care of my own file, Mom. You've got plenty else to organize. A flicker crossed her face, one beat of a frown, gone under the next smile like a fish slipping under ice. She patted my arm and changed the subject to Whitney's launch party. Driving home, I finally admitted what my body had already known for weeks. Whatever the plan was, it had a deadline. I could feel it ticking. What happened during the first week of May, I didn't witness firsthand. I reconstructed it later, the way you reconstruct anything, from timestamps, from documents, from a fraud file that would eventually carry my name as the reporting party. A package arrived at Concord Ridge Financial, sent overnight, professionally assembled. Inside was the original 2020 power of attorney bearing my real, notarized signature, entirely legitimate. And stapled behind it, like a key hidden behind a door, was a letter on medical letterhead, Ferris Family Medicine, Erie Avenue, my actual doctor's practice, or something wearing its face convincingly. The letter stated that the patient, Renee Elaine Ashford, was suffering from a major depressive episode with associated cognitive impairment. That she presented as high-functioning to those around her but was, in the physician's clinical judgment, currently unable to reliably manage her own financial affairs. That activation of her durable power of attorney was, in that same judgment, medically appropriate at this time. It was signed with a doctor's name and dated in late April, the exact stretch of days my mother had been complimenting my hair and casually requesting my driver's license. Attached was a typed cover sheet requesting that Concord Ridge recognize Carol Ashford as the acting agent, and add Whitney Ashford as an authorized party on the account effective immediately, so the family could manage the situation with discretion. Discretion. I've read that cover sheet more times than I want to admit, and that single word still puts frost down my spine. Here's the detail that tells you everything about how it was built. The letterhead was correct. The margins were correct. The clinical language ran as smooth as tap water. Whoever composed that letter knew exactly what a physician's stationery is supposed to look like. My mother spent 17 years working the front desk of a family medical practice before she retired, printing referral letters and insurance forms every single day. I'm not saying anything outright. I'm simply showing you the ledger. The first ripple to reach me arrived as an email. Automated. Gray as gravel. Concord Ridge Financial, documents have been received regarding your account and are currently under review. No names, no details, just the machine clearing its throat. I called the number on my lunch break and got a polite young man who could only confirm that a power of attorney package was in processing, and that a specialist would reach out if anything required my attention. A package in processing. My revocation had gone in weeks earlier, but had it been indexed yet, attached to my file? Was it sitting in the same queue, a handful of envelopes behind the one aimed directly at it? I stood in the parking lot outside my office, phone against my ear, feeling the very specific helplessness of a woman watching two documents race each other through a bureaucracy, one wearing her name, and the other wearing her mind. I called Priya. She was in court. She called back 90 minutes later, which I spent alphabetizing nothing in particular. Her advice was the unglamorous, correct kind. Don't call them again. Don't explain anything to anyone. From this point forward, everything happens in writing. If that package is what we think it is, the next call you get isn't going to be from customer service. She was right, as usual, though even she didn't guess how fast it would come. It was a Tuesday in May, mid-morning, a client file still open on my screen, when my mother called. This is the moment I told you about at the very beginning, so let me give it to you whole. Her voice was bright as confetti, triumphant and tender all at once, the voice of a woman genuinely convinced she was delivering wonderful news. Sweetheart, it's done. We got Whitney added, so she can access your account. The studio deposit goes out Friday. I know you were scared about it, honey, but one day you'll thank me. I said it quietly, and something in my quiet made the whole line go still. Funny. I moved it all out weeks ago. There's $12.75 left. The silence on that line had furniture in it. I could hear her breathing change rooms. No. No, that can't be right. That's the family cushion. That's the family's money. It never was, Mom. Check Nana's paperwork. In the background, my sister's voice climbed like a kettle coming to boil. "She's lying, Mom, check the app, check the app." And farther back, from a doorway somewhere, my father's voice, low and useless. "Carol." A man patting a fire out with nothing but a dish towel. My mother's voice came back to me, shaking. "And here is the part one need you to sit with, because I've sat with it myself for months since." She did not say we're sorry. She did not say we were wrong. She said, "How could you do this to your sister?" To your sister. I ended the call the way I'd close out a client file. I told them I loved them. I set the phone face down on my desk. My hand stayed steady, right up until the moment they didn't. 48 hours later, my phone rang again. Unknown number, Downtown Exchange. A woman's voice, level as a ruler. "Ms. Ashford, this is Lauren Voss, Fraud Prevention, Concord Ridge Financial. Do you have a few minutes to talk about your account?" Lauren Voss spoke the way flat farmland looks, no hills, no valleys, just procedure stretching to the horizon. I will be grateful to that woman's voice for the rest of my life. She walked me through it. When a power of attorney package claims a client is incapacitated, Concord Ridge doesn't simply flip a switch. Compliance verifies. A specialist had called Ferris Family Medicine directly to confirm the letter, standard box checking practice. Except the practice had no record of it anywhere. The office manager pulled my chart while the specialist waited on hold. No such letter had ever been written. No such assessment had ever taken place. The signature didn't match the doctor's on file. The physician whose name appeared on the letter was, in Voss's words, extremely concerned. The package had been referred to the internal fraud unit that same afternoon. Then she asked her questions, gentle the way scalpels are gentle. "Ms. Ashford, are you currently under any medical care that affects your ability to manage your finances?" "No." "Did you at any point authorize anyone to represent you as incapacitated?" "No." "Do you recognize the parties who submitted this package?" And there it was, the question with my entire family folded up inside it. I looked out my window at the parking lot, at a woman wrestling a car seat into a minivan, ordinary life proceeding at full, unbothered speed, and I said, yes. The submitting party was my mother. The added party was my sister. Voss didn't gasp. Fraud units don't gasp. I suspect they've heard the word mother far more often than anyone would hope. She thanked me and said the file would be escalated, and that I'd be receiving documents. Then, before hanging up, she said the one sentence I didn't know I'd been waiting years to hear from a total stranger. "To be clear, Ms. Ashford, there is nothing wrong with you. There is something wrong with this letter." She emailed me the scan an hour later. "I want to tell you what it's like to read a document designed to erase you, written by people who taught you how to read in the first place." I opened the PDF standing at my kitchen counter, because sitting down felt too much like agreeing to something. There was my full name, Renee Elaine Ashford, the Elaine from Nana Pearl, spelled out in clean, clinical type. Major depressive episode with cognitive impairment. Patient presents as high-functioning. Unable to reliably manage her financial affairs. Activation of the durable power of attorney is medically appropriate. I read it twice. The room went very still, and Denominator came and pressed his weight against my feet the way he does when the air in a room shifts. High-functioning. Even my sanity, graded by how useful I looked from the outside. Then the date caught me and wouldn't let go. The letter was dated the 3rd week of April, the same week I'd brought the cake and dried the dishes while my mother hummed and asked, one by one, about my sleep, my stress, my doctor, my driver's license. Every one of those questions lined up now like figures in a column, and the column finally summed correctly. She hadn't been worried about me. She'd been drafting me, gathering specifics so a forged letter would sound like the work of someone who genuinely knew her patient. And God help me, she did know that patient. She'd known her for 35 years. That's what I couldn't get past, standing there with my thumb hovering over the screen. This wasn't a stranger stealing an identity out of a mailbox. My identity had been handed over from memory. The fonts were right. The margins were right. The tone was right. 17 years at a medical front desk teaches you exactly what paper has to look like before people obey it. I closed the laptop, stood in my quiet kitchen, and said out loud, to nobody, "You wrote me a diagnosis instead of an apology." You'd think a fraud file would have shocked my family into silence. Instead, they reached for the only tool still left in the drawer, the story. Within a week my phone had become a switchboard. My aunt, syrupy with borrowed concern, "Honey, your mom says you've been struggling. Are you eating?" A cousin I hadn't spoken to since her wedding, "No judgment, but is it true you drained your accounts and cut everyone off?" The family group chat, which I was still on, which tells you exactly how carefully the campaign had been aimed, filled with my mother's posts. An old, washed-out photo of me at maybe 18, captioned, "Please keep our girl in your prayers." Praying hands emoji. Do you see the architecture of it? The exact same fiction my mother had built in order to steal from me had now become her alibi for having tried. I wasn't a woman whose mother forged a doctor's letter. I was a fragile, unstable daughter who'd emptied her own savings in some kind of manic spiral and run from the people trying to save her. And hadn't Mom been saying for weeks how worried she was? The forgery had quietly become its own character witness. That's the part no fraud unit can ever prosecute, the way a lie about your mind gets laundered through casseroles and prayer requests until relatives you love look at you sideways at funerals for the rest of your life. I didn't respond in the group chat. I'm told my silence was discussed at length as further evidence of my condition. There's no winning move against that particular game, which is exactly why I finally stopped playing it. I let the phone buzz itself to sleep on the counter. Then, on a Thursday evening, it buzzed differently. A text from my father, who signs his own birthday cards with whatever pen my mother hands him. It read, "Call me. Just you." He picked a hardware store parking lot on Reading Road, which is the single most Mitchell Ashford sentence I can offer you, neutral territory, halfway between his house and mine, with lumber carts for cover. He was leaning against his old pickup when I pulled in, and he looked older than I'd ever seen him look, like frost had settled in overnight. He didn't do small talk, which is how I knew we'd finally arrived somewhere new. "The paper from the doctor," he said, eyes fixed on the cart corral. "There's a witness line on the power of attorney form." "That's my handwriting, Renee." I made myself breathe. "Did you know, Dad, what the letter said about me?" My father, 61 years old, wiped his hands on his jeans out of pure muscle memory, no rag anywhere in sight, and said, "Your mother told me it was protection paperwork, in case you ever burned yourself out. You work so hard, everybody knows that." She said the doctor was concerned, and it was better to have things in place. I signed where she pointed. I thought it was insurance. I believed him, which was the worst part of the whole conversation. Then he asked me the thing he'd actually driven out there to ask, not "How are you?" Not "Is any of what that letter says true?" because he already knew it wasn't. He'd watched me file his own taxes for free every February for a decade, sharp as a blade. "Don't make this bigger than it has to be, Renee. Whatever's going on with the money, your mother's not sleeping. She's not eating right. This could really hurt her." I looked at my father for a long moment and finally saw his exact position on the org chart of my family. He wasn't on my mother's side, not really. He was on the side of quiet. He always had been. And quiet, I was starting to understand, is a side. I hugged him, because I'm still his daughter, and drove home. Before I tell you what came next, I have to tell you what my Aunt Sandra told me, because it's the piece that keeps this from being a story about a simple monster. Sandra is my mother's younger sister, a retired hospice nurse who says true things at deeply inconvenient times, which is exactly why she isn't invited to everything anymore. She called one evening, not to lobby for anyone, just to talk. "I'm not taking sides," she said. "But you should know where your mother learned the math." In 1981, my mother was 19, working the front desk at a medical office to save for the nursing program that had already accepted her. Her own father had left the family years before. Her mother cleaned houses and still came up short every single month, with 3 younger children at the table. So every payday, 19-year-old Carol signed her whole check over. Nobody forced her, Sandra said. Nobody had to. It was simply understood. The strong one carries. And when Carol cried about her nursing program slipping further away, her own mother told her, "Carol, family doesn't keep score." I had to sit down on the arm of my couch. There it was, the sentence, 40 years older than me, passed down like a christening gown nobody ever asked to inherit. Sandra wasn't finished. Nobody ever paid her back, Renee. Not $1. Not a thank you. That's the thing about that family, they don't ask. They assign. I understood something in that moment I genuinely wish I didn't. My mother wasn't collecting money from me. She was collecting justice for a 19-year-old girl from 1981 that nobody had ever paid back. And I was simply the only one at the table who happened to earn enough to cover a 44-year-old debt. Understanding is a strange kind of gift. It explains everything, and it excuses nothing. The Concord Ridge envelope was still sitting on my kitchen table, still requiring a signature, when Priya came over that night. She did what good lawyers and good friends both do, she made sure I couldn't pretend I hadn't understood exactly what I was signing. The affirmation was short. It stated, in effect, I, Renee Ashford, am not incapacitated. I did not authorize this power of attorney activation. The medical letter submitted on my behalf was not written by my physician. Priya laid it flat on the table and walked me through each line. Once you sign, Concord Ridge's obligations kick in automatically. A regulated firm sitting on evidence of a forged physician's letter has to refer it. That's not your decision, and it's not theirs either, it's the rulebook talking. And you should know the referral train has more than one engine already running. Dr. Ferris's office filed their own complaint days ago. It's their name on that forgery. Their license. Their letterhead. This is moving forward with you or without you. I asked her the only question left. Then what does my signature actually change? She looked at me the way she used to write before final exams. Without you, it's a paperwork case. With you, it has a victim who says so out loud. Your name is what makes it real. And your mother will know exactly who made it real. Outside, a neighbor's sprinkler ticked steadily across the lawn, the single most ordinary sound on earth. I thought about Sunday dinners and the good china. I thought about a 19-year-old girl in 1981 handing over her paycheck, and a 13-year-old girl with a soft, worn envelope, and how one of them had raised the other without either of them ever once noticing the resemblance. Then I picked up my pen and signed my name. All of it. Renee Elaine Ashford, the Elaine from Nana. We faxed it at 11:47 that night. 11 days later, a detective's card was waiting in my mailbox. Before that same week was out, my mother was standing in my hallway holding a foil-wrapped casserole dish like a white flag. Let me lay that week out for you, because it arrived all at once, like weather rolling in off the river. Monday, the card. An economic crimes detective from the Cincinnati Police Department, with a case number and a handwritten note asking me to call about giving a victim statement. We scheduled it for the following Thursday. I had 10 days, and somehow everyone in my family seemed to already know the clock was running, though nobody would say how they knew. Tuesday, my father called, my father, who initiates phone calls the way other men write poetry, meaning almost never. No hello. If your mother ends up with a record, that's on you. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone and answered him the only way that was still entirely true. I'm not doing anything to her, Dad. I'm done being the bank, and I'm done being the alibi. Those are the only 2 jobs I'm quitting. He went quiet, said my name once, just Renee, the way you'd say it standing beside a car you both knew you couldn't fix, and hung up. Wednesday, Whitney texted a full paragraph, thumbs blazing. The heart of it, you've always had everything. Mom did this for me because you never would have. You get to be fine no matter what happens. Some people actually need help. But I guess family only matters when you're the one keeping score. I read it twice and put the phone down. Across that entire flood of a week, the calls, the texts, the group chat prayer hands, I want you to notice the same thing I finally noticed myself. Not one person, not a single time, said the word sorry. They negotiated. They accused. They mourned the consequences. The act itself had already been quietly, collectively voted out of existence. Then Thursday evening, 1 week before my scheduled statement, my doorbell rang. My mother stood in my hallway in her church cardigan, holding a casserole dish with a lid still slightly warm. For one dangerous second, she simply looked like my mom. "Can I come in, sweetheart?" She had never once been inside my apartment in the 5 years I'd lived there. She entered like a housing inspector, quietly cataloging as she came. The curtains were thin, she noted. The building was old. Did the radiators knock? She found denominator and called him a good boy in the exact voice I remembered from every scraped me of my childhood, and denominator, traitor to the entire cause, wagged his tail. I put the kettle on because my hands needed a job to do. I still keep a specific cup for her, cream-colored with a blue cornflower, bought at a church rummage sale years ago because it looked like her own kitchen. 5 years it had waited in my cabinet for a visit that never came. And now here she was, and I hated how much the sight of her moved me anyway. She talked about Nana Pearl, about summers at a lake cottage, matching swimsuits. Remember when things were simple, Renee? It was beautiful, and it was aimed. With my mother, those had never been different things. Then she reached into her purse and set an envelope on my table, and my chest tightened before I'd even seen what was inside. Not an apology. A job application. Front desk position, a dental office off Montgomery Road, filled out in Whitney's looping handwriting, ready to be mailed. She's going to work, Renee. See, everything can go back to normal. My mother smoothed the envelope flat like a bedsheet. I just need you to do one thing. She'd clearly rehearsed it. You'll talk to that detective Thursday. All you have to say is that you knew, that we'd discussed the power of attorney, that you'd agreed the family could step in if you ever got overwhelmed. And the letter was just a mix-up with the doctor's office. You thought it had already been arranged. One sentence, honey, and all of this goes away. They don't prosecute misunderstandings. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her hand was warm and dry and smaller than I remembered, and her eyes filled right on schedule. Families protect each other, Renee. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. Christmas, Sunday dinners, your father, your sister, the whole table, all of it comes back, honey. All of it. Just like it used to be. Then, soft as a hymn, don't trade your entire family for a piece of paper. I want to freeze this frame for you, because standing in my kitchen, wrapped in my mother's cardigan, was the exact question I'd been living inside all year. Does protecting your family mean shielding them from every consequence? Every woman raised to be the reliable one knows this exact crossroads, maybe without a literal detective involved, but the shape is always identical. The lie is always small. The family is always presented as large. The math is always framed as obvious. My mother watched me with the eyes of a woman who, in 61 years, had never once seen this particular trade refused, because she herself had made it at 19 and called it love ever since. The kettle clicked off as it cooled. Denominator jumped down from his chair, and I heard myself ask her the only question I truly had left. Mom. Are you sorry? She blinked, and I watched the question bounce off some inner surface and come back completely changed. Sweetheart, I hate what this is doing too. Not sorry it's messy. Not sorry about the detective. Are you sorry you did it? The letter. My name. My mind, Mom. You put a disease in my medical chart that I don't have, and you were about to hand my sister my life's work while I stood there certified as broken. The steam had stopped rising off her cup entirely. My mother sat up straighter and reached for the oldest tool on her belt, the one that had never once failed her. "Everything I have ever done, I did for this family," she said, her voice trembling exactly right. Whitney needed a chance. "And you, look at you, Renee. You always land on your feet, honey. You always have, since you were a baby. You didn't need it the way she does. Money just sitting in an account, and my child drowning. What kind of mother would I be?" "Family doesn't," I said it with her, quiet, in unison. 35 years of muscle memory. "Keep score," we finished together. The sentence hung between us in two voices. Then I said the rest alone. "You're right, Mom. Family doesn't keep score. That's exactly why you never noticed I was the only one paying." Something crossed her face I'd genuinely never seen there before, the flicker of a cashier realizing, one beat too late, that the drawer has already been counted. She tried tears. Some of them, I believe, were real. I think she tried volume, and the names she reached for had already been second-hand worn by relatives in the group chat. Unstable. Cold. Calculated, that last one she spat out like a pit. And I remember thinking, yes, Mom. Someone here calculated. The arithmetic is simply in evidence now. I didn't raise my voice. That's the strangest thing I've learned all year. The closer I get to the actual center of my own life, the quieter it gets in there. "Thursday, I'm going to sit with that detective," I told her, "and tell the truth. Not a word more, not a word less. I won't build the case, and I won't bury it either. For once, Mom, what happens next isn't going to get paid for by me." She stood so fast her chair barked against the tile. "Then you are no daughter of mine. There are sentences you spend your entire childhood dreading, and when they finally arrive, they're almost a relief, the invoice, at last, in writing." I picked up her cup, cornflour and all, and set it gently in the sink. Then I opened my front door and held it open for her. "Drive safe, Mom." She left the casserole behind. The lock clicked shut, soft as a period at the end of a very long sentence. And somewhere inside that click was every Christmas I would probably never be invited to again. The Economic Crimes Unit works out of a building with all the charm of a filing cabinet, which, honestly, I found comforting. Thursday morning, 9 sharp, a conference room with the kind of gray carpet that has seen 1,000 worse mornings than mine. The detective was younger than I'd expected, and thorough in a way I deeply respect. We went through the whole timeline the way I'd walk through a client's shoebox of receipts. The dinner in March. The voicemail in April. I played it, and she noted it for exactly what it was, context, not evidence. The revocation. The liquidation. She allowed herself the smallest flicker of a smile at $12.75, the only editorial comment she permitted herself all morning. The package at Concord Ridge. The letter. Then she slid the scan across the table one more time and asked if anything else stood out to me. I looked at my own name in that clinical font and told her the last true thing I had to give her. The header has my name right, Renee Elaine Ashford. But halfway down, one line calls the patient Renee Elaine. My middle name is Elaine, know why? My mother's childhood best friend was named Elaine. She always said she'd wanted it for one of us, and my dad overruled her. She's the only person alive who makes that exact spelling mistake. The detective wrote for a long while. I signed the statement, every page, initials in each corner, my full name at the end, the Elaine spelled correctly, right where it belonged. It's a strange feeling, spending your own signature like that. My whole life, my signature had been a service, tax returns, cosigns, witness lines, permission slips. This was the first one that cost me something, and belonged entirely, only, to me. Walking out into the parking lot, the sun was unreasonably, ordinarily bright. My phone buzzed. My father, you've made your choice. No question mark. He was right, for once. I put the phone away and let him be right about it. People sometimes ask if I regret any of it. Here's the honest accounting, because you've earned it by now. nobody went to prison. I never wanted that, not once. My mother was accepted into a pretrial diversion program, first offense, restitution of administrative costs, a mandated class, a probationary period of staying entirely out of trouble, after which the charge gets dismissed from her record. The system, as it turns out, extends first-time offenders a grace my own family never once extended to me. She tells relatives it was all a paperwork misunderstanding that Renee blew wildly out of proportion. Most of them find it easier to believe her, because believing her costs them absolutely nothing, and believing me costs them Christmas. Dr. Ferris's practice pursued their own complaint, overhauled their letter verification procedure, and now confirms every single request with a callback. One small clinic, slightly harder to forge now. Whitney took the front desk job at the dental office, the exact application our mother had filled out as a prop for my kitchen table, which is about the closest thing this whole story has to a joke. She's apparently good at it. I always said she was capable. I just, for years, said it alone. My father is still in the garage with that old truck. Some men rebuild the same engine for decades, purely so they never have to fix anything that might talk back. Aunt Sandra sends me photos of her tomato garden and never once asks me to come home for anything. That, it turns out, is its own quiet kind of love. My money sits at Meridian Trust, under one name, mine, with Priya holding a new power of attorney that only ever springs to life for licensed strangers, verified twice over. My will leaves what I built to a scholarship fund for first-generation accounting students at my old state school. And in October, Concord Ridge finally closed out the old account and mailed me the remaining balance. A check for $12.75. I never cashed it. It's framed on the wall above my desk, right next to a small photo of Nana Pearl. And on Wednesday evenings, it hangs there behind me while I teach a free class at the public library, power of attorney, beneficiary designations, what you're actually signing away when you sign it, to a room full of women. Every single one of whom, sooner or later, stays after class to tell me about a signature they once gave someone, purely because they loved them. I used to believe that love meant being the one who always pays. Here's what I know now, and what I hope you'll carry out of this story with you. In every family that insists it doesn't keep score, somebody is quietly keeping the books for everyone else, whether anyone thanks her for it or not. So keep your own records. Read the documents you've already signed like a stranger wrote them. Sign nothing out of guilt, and remember, $12.75 of truth is worth more than $138,000 of keeping the peace. That's my story. One forged letter, one emptied account, and $12.75 that finally got repaid. If this reminded you to go check your own paperwork, your power of attorney, your beneficiaries, the names quietly listed on your accounts, take that as your sign to do it this week. And if you know a woman in your own life who's always the reliable one, the one everyone assumes will simply absorb it, share this with her.